not receiving acknowledgement of our rights. Our rights are not being held up. We are being considered less than other citizens here. As a society, do we house people with dignity, empathy, and with the rights of humans in mind? And if we do, transgender women belong in women prisons. Isn't that a goal? Shouldn't our goal for imprisoning people be humane? Would you not agree with that? Come on, you have to agree with that. You have to agree with humane things are good. Humanity, good. Empathy, good. Recognizing someone's identity, good. Hello, and thank you for joining me. It's Brandi's World, and I'm Brandi Beckett. Today, we are taking another look at the podcast Generation Indoctrination, the Transgender Battle, which is brought to us by the Christian Post and hosted by Brandon Showalter. And this episode is titled Bonus: Biological Men in Women's Prisons, ? The insane and terrifying situation plaguing female inmates. Ooh, if you go back and watch the last episode I did on their podcast, it was the first part of this bonus episode. And in the first part, they interviewed a woman who was incarcerated and was totally freaked out because there was a trans woman who was being housed near her. And this she thought was unbelievable. And she called all her family and friends and said, "You're not going to believe it. There's a trans woman." Well, she didn't use trans woman language. She denigrated and didn't recognize this person's gender identity. But then they were like shocked, this person is in housing with me. So, whatever. And listen to that episode, and we discuss a little bit about housing in our prison systems in the United States. So, we are going to continue, and we may make it through this episode. We'll see how far we can get into it. All right, so let's hear who they're going to interview next and what else they have to say about the women's prison system here in the United States.
And it isn't just happening in the United States. In 2020, I learned about the case of Nina Louise Courtpat, a 13-year-old Canadian girl who was brutally murdered in 2005 on an Edmonton, Alberta golf course. The man who killed her, Michael Williams, raped, stabbed, strangled, and bludgeoned her to death with a hammer before trying to light her body on fire. While he was caught and convicted of his brutal crimes, he began self-identifying as a woman and started taking hormones, and he has been allowed to live in the Fraser Valley Institute Women's Prison in Abbotsford, British Columbia. Sources told the Toronto Sun in February of 2020 that he only took cross-sex hormones 2 weeks per month so that he could still maintain an erection. According to Heather Mason, a Canadian advocate for incarceration.
Apparently they don't have any patient confidentiality in Canada, because why would you know why a person's taking their medication? But whatever. Okay, it looks like we have a situation where there is this awful monster of a person who brutally killed and raped a young lady or young girl. This is awful. This person happens to be trans. Okay, not every single trans person is going to be the perfect role model. We are among us in society. We are among everyone in society. We are members of society in all spectrums of society. There are going to be transgender people who are just amazing, awesome people. And there are going to be transgender people who are monsters. Just as there are in every group within our society, right? Think on that. Think about a group and try to picture the far edges of that group of people in their character. You're going to get a spectrum of them. Athletes, there have been monstrous athletes, and there's been remarkably great humans who are athletes. Entertainers, I don't have to mention too many names that are popular on our tongues. We know from our Hollywood celebrities who became monsters. We found out are monsters, and we found out some of them are amazing, wonderful people. It's like no matter which group you put brackets around in our society and saying all of these people should fit a monolith of a mold we have for them. You can't do that. Not everyone is going to fit into a monolith of molds that they're supposed to in society. The reasons we have logical fallacies is because we've recognized over thousands of years of argument that certain arguments are just bad arguments. And we call them logical fallacies if they logically fall apart. They don't hold. They're not sound. They're not valid arguments. So to try to place transgender people into a category and then say that category is bad because one part of the category, one person within that category is monstrous. There could be numerous monstrous people in this category. It doesn't make the category of people monstrous. It means there are monsters within the group. If you wanted to look at all of the amazing, what we would call saints of people, you will find them in the transgender community as well. You're going to find a spectrum of character of people within a group. And as that group expands over time and space and acceptance and grows and incorporates all the people who identify as transgender, there will be a bigger group to judge from. And there are going to be more monsters and there are going to be more saints. That's the way statistical things work. That's the way human societies work. We're going to get back to their podcast, and hopefully the whole episode is just not fallacious arguments about trans people being bad because a few monsters happen to be trans. We'll see. Okay, here we go.
Incarcerated women and a founding member of COSPAR, Canadian Women's Sex-Based Rights Group, Williams is now back in a men's prison after allegations were reportedly made against him, and he was known for maladaptive behavior. His requests to transfer back to the women's prison, as far as she knows, have since been denied. But he's far from the only case. Heather faced her own prison sentence years ago on
So, I'm not sure what their argument is there. They're saying that there is this monster. This monster got convicted and thrown in prison for being a monster. And that monster said, hey, recognize my identity. They did for a while, and then they didn't. Isn't that what they want? Is that a happy ending for them? No, that monster went to a different housing, out of our sight. We don't care what happens to that monster. Well, guess what? Not everyone in prison is going to be a monster. Not everyone held out of society and put into a prison system here in the United States is going to be monstrous. This is not the case. We have way too many people in our prison system to say everyone's a monster. So now let's think about, do we treat all our prisoners as if they are monsters? And if we do, what kind of society are we? Our rehabilitation system within our prison systems should never take away humanity. Do you agree with that? Do you agree that if a person is wrapped up in the American prison systems, they should be treated with dignity and rights? I should not lose the right to express my identity. I should not lose the right to my humanity because I am in a penal system. Does that make sense? Yeah, bring out the example of the monster. We don't really care. We don't have as much empathy for monsters as we do people within our in-group. And that is my point. Not every transgender person should be pushed outside of the in-group. Not everyone in society should be pushed outside of your in-group just because of who they are. In fact, no one should. You can push someone outside of your in-group because of their behaviors and the way they interact with the other humans in our society. They demonstrate themselves to be a monster, a rapist, a murderess, a harmful person to our society. Yes, take them outside of our in-group. Put them in a penal system. What else do they have to say?
Charges, and after her release, began to hear stories from incarcerated women who were dealing with men in the prisons. She said the issue worsened in Canada after the 2017 passage of Bill C-16, which added transgender self-identification language as legal categories of personhood to the National Human Rights Act and the Criminal Code.
Bill
C-16 right?
passed and it added gender identity or expression to the Canadian Human Rights Code. So basically, we couldn't discriminate against trans people. At first, the policy didn't change too much. Basically, all that happened, like the prison policy, was that you could apply for gender reassignment surgery after living as a woman for 1 year in the prison system, because prior it used to be that you had to live outside of prison for 1 year. And CSC, so Correctional Service of Canada, released that policy. And then there was a town hall meeting in Kingston, Ontario, with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. And someone got up and said, well, what about women in prison, like trans women? And Justin Trudeau admitted that he didn't really think about it and that he would look into it and change it. So basically, because of that town hall meeting, gender identity or expression became the grounds for transfers to women's prisons.
Wow, that's pretty cool. Good on you, Trudeau. You said, wow, I didn't think of this problem. This is a huge problem. There are people, and we have to recognize their human rights. And when they say, yo, I'm a trans woman, why am I being housed in men's prisons? Trudeau's like, you make a solid point. Let's get you into the women's prisons, because we're not monsters here imprisoning people. We want to be humane when we imprison people. Isn't that a goal? Shouldn't our goal for imprisoning people be humane? Would you not agree with that? Come on, you have to agree with that. You have to agree with humane things are good. Humanity, good. Empathy, good. Recognizing someone's identity, good. I don't understand the argument. Okay, let's continue.
This begs some important questions. Why is this unfolding? And what happens when women speak out against it? When female prisoners object to these men, Amy said they often face retribution inside of a system that is completely beholden to this gender dogma and rushes to fulfill its demands.
I interpret it as them being labeled thought criminals. There is a woman who submitted an inmate complaint to staff and made a complaint about a man putting his penis on her. And she received the complaint back. It was returned with her information crossed out, and it said a woman with a penis. And
right, oh my God, they are treating that prisoner with dignity. You can get it right. Yes, it's a woman. That woman happens to have a penis. That woman wasn't doing things that she should be doing with that penis. That woman seemed like, if that report is correct, they are invading someone's privacy. Whether they have a penis or not, that is not okay to invade someone's privacy like that. That is violating their autonomy. You can't do that, whether you have a penis or not a penis. With no consent, that is not okay. The issue is the misnomenclature of the person's pronouns and the person's identity. Let's continue.
No, she doesn't believe that is true, and that's just not what a lot of people believe. So this is now forcing an ideology on this population like a religion. It's really like mental incarceration. And so there's a lot of manipulation and game playing that occurs here that's on a level that women are not used to. The people who are being transferred in are skilled manipulators who've been in the system for 10, 20, 30, 40 years. So they are experts.
What is she on about? Okay, look, she just said that there are women, I'm assuming like herself and others, who don't believe that those trans women are actual women. And that's what she said. It's, well, of course you can have all these laws saying that they are human rights for us to recognize, and the system has to recognize it, but I don't believe it. This argument, can you imagine this argument happening in the 1860s? Oh yes, it's these legal rights. And this argument probably happened many places in the South and across the United States, where these landowners were going, you know, they're forcing us to recognize these other people as humans like us and equal like us, but I just don't believe it. They can't force, it's like a religion. They're forcing me to believe that these other people here in our United States are just as equal as us. I don't believe it. Is there a difference in that argument? Or maybe this argument could be happening in the 1960s and 1970s, and they'll be going, you know what? They're human rights. They're civil rights. They want to have these civil human rights. But I just don't believe that they're on the equal with us. I don't believe that they have these rights as we do. Was that argument made in the 60s and 70s? Pretty sure it was. Now we're hearing it again. We hear this argument every time that there is a group of social people, there's a group of humans within our society who say, look, we are not getting the dignity and respect that we should as other citizens. We're not receiving acknowledgement of our rights. Our rights are not being held up. We are being considered less than other citizens here. And every time a group of people make this point and say, look at us, we should be treated with equality and normality like these other groups are. People fight back against that because they're scared of change and they're scared of losing privileges. And when people have privileges so ingrained into their culture, into their society, that they no longer recognize them as privileges, it feels threatening when their privileges are being taken away to create equality across society. Does that make sense? Conflating a privilege with the right can be painful to people. Transgender movement is not about privileges. It is about rights. And all of these bills thus far that they have brought up in the penal systems, whether it's the California penal system or now the Canadian penal system, the laws that they are fighting against are laws that say use dignity and humane methods to treat prisoners. And they're fighting against that. These are archaic arguments they're using. They are using scare tactics to frighten other people because they are frightened, because they don't understand why not every woman looks like every other woman. Not every woman is fit into a mold. Not every woman is a monolith of what we call woman. That scares them. That scares them that identities exist on a spectrum, that within the group of what we call women is going to be diversity. That scares them. Diversity and change scares these people. But this country is built on diversity and change. That's what we have always been about. Across the globe, we have been a leader in our progressive thinking. We have been a leader in our humanity across the globe. At least we tell ourselves that, right? Why should we stop being humane and using dignity to treat others when it comes to transgender people? We shouldn't. There's no good reason to do that. The only reason is being scared, and being scared is not a good reason. The other reason, don't understand. Not understanding something is not a good reason to shut it down. To shut down a movement. to try to stop people from achieving equality and normality. Scared and not understanding are not reasons to do that. Step out of the way if you don't understand. Listen and learn if you don't understand. If you're prejudiced against a person because who they are, step aside and let society progress, because you are archaic. Your thinking is archaic. Your thinking is not in line with American progression of equality.
And there is no exercise that the women could have done to be prepared adequately. If people aren't able to understand or to see the issue that's happening here, that this is being taken advantage by very predatory people, then it's just because they don't want to see it, because incarcerated women don't matter.
Amy now has over 1,000 emails from people revealing the disturbing occurrences in prisons, and that parents often call her in tears. One of the challenges, of course, is getting the public to understand what's unfolding, that it really is this terrible. That's something Amanda also deals with regularly.
It doesn't seem enough to merely say, yes, this is happening, and even for people to say, okay, yes, it is. Somehow they need more specifics often to really understand the
Because you're telling people, look, I'm in a women's prison and there are transgender women in here. And the person's like, and okay, and where should transgender women be housed, are you presuming? Should we throw them in with men? What other women should we throw in with men? What about just like women we don't like? What about ones that society consider ugly, just not attractive women? Can we throw those in with, can we just throw them away like we're trying to throw away the trans women? Yeah, because that would be a weird conversation to be like, and you won't believe it, in women's prisons, there are trans women. Am I shocked that trans women did crimes? Oh, not really, because people do crimes and they're people. Am I shocked that they're in a women's prison? No, I feel a little bit better because, yes, it seems like they revealed their identity and it was recognized and they're housed properly, okay? So yeah, you would need more information, right, lady? Well, what is scary about that? Is every single trans woman who've ever been in a prison just done what? I don't understand. What am I even supposed to point to? Done extraordinary things that other prisoners cannot or will not do? Because if you're just beating around the bush and trying to say that, yo, these women have penises, therefore they're going to rape, I got news for you. It doesn't take a penis to rape someone. That's not required for rape. Women's prisons have rape. They've always had rape. That's scary. Don't try to throw something that occurs and has occurred throughout the time and space of all women's prisons and saying that now that we are recognizing and focusing on one certain group of women, we're going to blame all of those problems onto that group of women. Because that would not be a good argument, would it? And that would not be a good reason, would it?
Gravity of this, the human rights abuse of this, that is what it takes. It takes some more detail.
And those details are truly spine-chilling. Explaining that some of these men have long sentences and thus have no incentive for good behavior, Amanda shared with me some of the most horrific examples that she's encountered.
Oh, let's take that same sentence. And some of these women have long sentences and have no care for their behaviors. And it works either way, right? Doesn't it? Goodness.
An allegation out of the prison in California that an incapacitated woman was sexually assaulted by a male inmate there, who was then confronted by the women, and his response was to threaten to rape the other women and to abuses at them. And as far as I'm aware, that person has not been sent back to a men's prison. So the women who are subjected to the mere presence of these men are faced with the prospect that even in the face of the most gross violations and the most gross misconduct, that their complaints may go unheard and that they may be the ones punished for raising issues and concerns and reports. This has been consistent.
They're going to find some monsters in prisons. I hate to break that news to you, but that's kind of where we keep our monsters. At least we're supposed to keep our monsters there, right? We don't want our monsters in society. We keep them away in our prison systems. So replace monster transgender person with monster X. Monster woman we don't like. Monster different woman. Not the trans woman, just a different woman. Same thing could happen. If that woman could have raped a woman and said, F you, I don't care, I'll rape all of you. She didn't need a penis to do that, did she? Again, doesn't hold. The argument doesn't hold that transgender women don't belong in women's prisons, because that's exactly where a criminal transgender woman would belong, in women's housing, if they are a woman. Let's continue.
In multiple prison systems, that isn't from one. We've heard that from women in multiple states in different situations, that there's just a pervasive feeling that they can get away with anything, and I'm the one who's going to be in trouble if I report it.
And this was, according to both Amy and Amanda, an issue in California even prior to the state legislation that codified these regulations into law.
Even before SB 132, the first male inmate in California was an individual male inmate housed in the women's prison in California, as a male named Richard Masbrook. And Richard Masbrook was placed in the women's prison because he did not have a fully intact penis. And the reason he did not was because after he committed his crime, and his crime was that he held hostage a woman and her mother, an adult woman and her mother, and he raped and sodomized the daughter, and he applied electrical shocks to them. He tortured and raped them, raped the daughter, held them hostage. After that, he made efforts to burn his penis off with acid. That man who committed that crime on the mere basis of not having a fully functioning penis was allowed to transfer into the women's prison in California, even before SB 132.
Likewise,
I'm so confused. Did that person put acid in their genitals and also say that they're transgender woman? Maybe. I don't know. That person sounds like a monster. Again, monsters in prison. Am I shocked that there are transgender women in prison systems? No! Again, no! Should you be shocked that there are transgender women in prison systems? Not in America. No. No, because America has a large population within its prison systems. Therefore, there are going to be trans people. There are going to be a lot of different people in our prison systems because we house more of our citizens in prison than any other developed country, whatever developed means, right? Any economic powerhouse as large as us has not even close to the amount of prisoners in their systems as we do. So yeah, there's going to be prisoners. Some of them are going to be transgender people. The argument is, where do we house them? Should we house them with dignity, and should we house them using rights? Should we uphold their rights? Should you recognize someone's identity as their right, someone's right to express who they are, to express their identity? If you value that as a right, yes, transgender women should be in women's prisons when they're prisoners. Right? Transgender men, when there are prisoners, should be in men's housing, because we have our housing not by sex but by gender. Men's, women's, gender. right? We didn't say penis house and vagina house, or penis house, non-penis house. We don't say it like that. We use gender, and gender is not defined by genitals. Your gender identity is innate within you and is only expressed from within to out. Does that make sense? So your gender is not dictated by your sexual characteristics. It's not yoked to your sexual characteristics. It's not your genitals. Your gender identity is within you. Your gender is expression. Your gender expression is how you project that identity from inward to outward. That's your gender expression. Your gender identity in you. Expression, expressing it out. Let's see what else they have to say.
In Canada, Heather also recounted some of the troubling stories she's heard. And she's not persuaded by those who might think that having male offenders in women's prisons is fine, provided that they've undergone a surgery to remove their genitals.
Sexual predators don't just stop being sexual predators once you cut their penis off. A famous story inside about this exact example would be Matthew Hart's. So Matthew Hart's is a prolific serial pedophile with like 60 victims and over 200 offenses, and he has had surgery. And he sexually assaulted an Indigenous woman in the bathroom at
Yes, sexual assault, rape, all of that. It's about power and control. And that's what those people are doing. They are taking away someone's autonomy, they're taking away someone's dignity, and they're applying their control and their force onto someone. They are invading that person. They are not respecting them as a person when they rape them. That's what it is. It's not a sexual release. It's not a sexual... I don't know what it is. I don't know. I'm not a rapist. I don't know what the drive is. But what the psychology tells us is that it is a control thing. And yes, it's not about the genitals. A rapist is a rapist. Right? Have people been raped with objects? Have people been raped with other things besides a penis? Yes, it happens. We live in a system where we have our prisoners in a binary, right? So as long as we go by that binary, we have to accept that there's going to be trans people within the binary, because we don't use a spectrum. So not everyone in a prison system is going to be in accord with their gender assignment. So, as a society, do we house people with dignity, empathy, and with the rights of humans in mind? And if we do, transgender women belong in women prisons. Transgender men belong in men prisons when they're prisoners. Right? We just don't round them up and throw them in prisons. Oh, let's hope we don't do that. Goodness. So, all right. We have more in this bonus episode. What else are they going to tell us?
BI, so Grand Valley Institution in Kitchener, Ontario. That's the prison I was in. He got sent back to prison for making inappropriate comments and sexually harassing one of my friends in the halfway house. Everywhere he goes, he has victims, and he likes to go after the women who are small and childlike, or he goes after the women who are like developmentally delayed. So he's still an issue, and you don't need a penis to hurt these women. There are other objects, there are his hands, there's his mouth.
I was just saying that.
It just takes away the possibility of pregnancy after rape.
This led Heather to...
She just made my point. Yes. Yeah, why are you scared of the transfer? You're scared of that monster. And I agree with that person. That person sounds like a monster. I don't want that monster near me. Yeah, that would suck. That would suck. There's monsters in prisons. It sucks. I don't have a good answer for how not to encounter a monster when you're in the prison system. It's gonna be there. It's where we house them. That's just the way it works. Okay, well, there's more to this bonus episode, but I think we're going to wrap up our look at today's episode. So, until next time, love yourself, but more importantly, like yourself, and treat people the way they want to be treated. Bye-bye for now.